Greetings, fellow visitors. This is Upgrade Terminal, a Star of Providence fan cast. I'm Malachi.
And I'm Nick. Welcome back to the facility.
Nick, it's great to be here with you.
Same, man, same. Over here in the facility, it's nice to have some nice company.
Yeah, it is. It's a nice place to be. There's a lot of scary things down, outside of the hub, but sitting here in the hub's pretty nice.
Well, sitting with friends is what makes it enjoyable, really.
Yeah. Well, what have you been up to this week?
So, for a couple of weeks now, I've been talking with a friend of mine, and I've told them that one of the games I used to play a lot, like a lot, was The Sims 2 for the PC,
Mm-hmm.
and how I had a lot of fond memories and spent a lot of time with it, and how I kind of wish they could play it with me because it felt like the kind of game that they would really like to play. So, I went about trying to see. Okay, I still have I still actually have the CD-ROM with me, and could I maybe find some way to play it together? And turns out, it's a game from 2004. It doesn't run well in machines from almost 20 years later.
Huh.
So, after some searching and some guides, I managed to find a way to make it happen. Now I've got The Sims installed with a lot of expansion packs, including ones that I didn't buy. And now we're playing Sims 2 together, and we've made the Sims, and now we're in the process of building just a really nice house because spoilers, the game has built-in cheats to just give your Sims as much money as you want, so you can just make a house as fancy as you want.
Oh,
so
nice.
so we're going now through the process of, like, okay, we're building like a floor plan of the house we want to build, and like, okay, we have like this color palette that we're making, and we're decorating each part room by room, and it's just been a really nice process, this kind of creative process, and it's brought back some nice memories that of me playing this a long time ago, and now I get to share it with someone else.
That's so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are games that everyone's nostalgic about, but to revisit it, be able to install it, and then play it with a friend, that's sounds really nice, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's been delightful, and honestly, I just wish we did even more of it, or that I had looked into it sooner, because
Yeah.
this was an option that was always there. But I'm enjoying it now.
Yeah, you can make up for lost time.
Yeah. What about you, Malachi?
This week, there's been a couple things that have been really nice. One is just this evening, actually, I had a chance to meet up and with a friend of mine that I haven't seen in quite a while. We work in the same industry, so it's always kind of fun to talk shop with one another. But we met up at a local tavern,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to go to this tavern quite a lot. And he's not a bouncer, but like the guy that cards people when they come in. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
technically, I guess he's a bouncer, but this isn't the kind of it's not a nightclub.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he used to recognize me. If I show up there, he's like, "Oh, hey, welcome in, man," and
Mm-hmm.
it was always such a really nice feeling. I hadn't been there for probably almost a year
Mm-hmm.
for various reasons. Just got really busy and such, and I went in there tonight to meet my friend, and I saw this bouncer, this door guard, and he's like, "I need to see ID." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Oh man, he forgot who I was." And he's like, "No, I'm just kidding, man. It's been a long time. Welcome." And he got me so good, but it was such a cool feeling, and I really like that guy. I don't know who he is. He doesn't know who I am, really, but he recognizes me as a regular, and that's such a great feeling. I just really appreciate that he's been so welcoming to me over the last few years. Anyway, it's a small thing, but he's a nice guy. Nick, one thing I've thought about a lot over the years is games that I've spent a lot of time in often end up feeling almost like a semi real place. just because I've spent so much time in that digital world, exploring it, inhabiting a character in that world, that it takes on kind of a life of its own in my mind, in my imagination.
So what you're saying is that because you spend so much time thinking about this place and navigating in this space, you start thinking of them in the same ways that you would physical spaces.
Yeah, I think it's a common. I mean, there are a lot of video games that I've played that don't end up feeling this way. For me, it's always a game where the story or the world engages me so much that it I start to imagine beyond the borders of the game itself.
This feeling that the game world is in some sense alive and it exists beyond what you can see, and that there's it feels like if you just were able to just go a little bit further and go beyond the trees of the mountain, you would find even more to explore.
Yeah, yeah, there are games that kind of have this innate sense of life, that it is a living world, and if it's a world that you kind of click with and engage with, I think the imagination kind of naturally wants to expand upon it. And the best example I can think of for this is a game called Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles.
Hmm.
I played this on the GameCube with my little brother, and this game is hands down one of the greatest video game experiences I've had of all time. Not
Mhm.
because the game itself is amazing. In fact, they re-released it. Um,
Mhm.
I want to say a couple years ago, like a remastered version, and it was a pretty poor remaster overall. But of course, I picked it up and played it and enjoyed it. But I realized that what made it really magic was the time I spent inside the game with my brother,
Mhm.
because that made it feel even more like a real place.
It was a shared space.
Yes, yes, it was a shared space, and I mean, I can even to this day, I can close my eyes and I can imagine many of the spaces that we spent time in fighting monsters, buying things at the market, and it feels not like a real place, but like a tangible place that I was once at.
Mhm.
This concept has always fascinated me. I think it's so neat that video games can do this. It's always spoken to me of the power of video games as art and as a medium that can connect people and make us feel things and think things and really uh, cause us to expand our horizons through imagination. Are there any games that you feel similarly about?
Well, you know what? When we sat down to talk about this episode, I thought I did, and then you started talking. I'm like, oh no, wait, he means something so much more profound and poetic than what I thought of.
Nah, I'm not profound and poetic. No, no, no. Hit me with what you got. Hit me with what you got.
I will stress this is definitely not the same I guess perspective that you have just now elaborated on.
Hmm.
But anyway, one game in which I did spend a lot of time in is a multiplayer first person shooter called Team Fortress 2. I don't know if
Mm,
you've seen it at least.
of course.
Yeah. So the spaces in that game are the maps themselves, the maps in which the fighting takes place.
Hmm.
I have spent hundreds of hours in several maps. And when I say that, I mean that sometimes I would boot up the game and go to a map, like go to an empty server
Hmm.
and just explore the map, right? Like the map of the game devoid or separated from its objective, devoid from its gameplay purpose, as it were, and just explore it for what it is, sort of separated from its context. And that was really just an interesting experience. And you start to notice all the details or the all the doors and rooms that are just set dressing to sort
Hmm.
of vaguely contextualize this place. Oh, it's a spy base. Oh, it's an outpost, or it is this front for this corporation. And you have all of this set dressing that is just meant to sort of, facilitate this vague narrative.
Hmm.
But when you start looking at it, it's like, well, what's over there? Like, what's beyond that fence? What's beyond that door? What's that room I can look into? What
Yeah.
are all these props scattered around? Like normally when you're playing, you don't give these a second thought. You're just thinking hallways, doors, arenas. You
Hmm.
think of them for what purpose they serve for gameplay. But when
Yeah.
you take that out and you start looking at how is it actually built, what objects are there, what is the setting, it takes on a different meaning.
I know that feeling you're talking about. As you were describing this, I was like, oh, I've done that with friends on Halo maps back in the
Hmm.
day.
Yeah. But I guess in a sense it's this weird paradox in that when you're playing a game, the sort of the objective kind of is the thing that you focus on, and
Hmm.
everything else is just set dressing that is just meant to sort of facilitate the context for what you're doing. So you're not focusing on it, so it doesn't seem important. But if that's not there, then the world just feels so much more barren and abstract and untethered.
Hmm.
Because if you just have a level that's just boxy rooms and featureless corridors, that is very rapidly uninteresting or not appealing. But as soon as you put some objects, oh, you put a desk here, oh, you put a water cooler here and some chairs here, suddenly it's an office building. And now you're thinking, what does this place do exactly within the narrative? What is this place? Why are we here?
I think you and I have both spent enough time in the walls of the facility of Star of Providence that it occupies a large portion of our imagination.
Um, I would say so, yes.
Have you seen the movie Inside Out, the Pixar film?
Yes, I have.
So you know how the girl Riley in her brain there's an island for every like the family island, the sports island,
Uh
the
huh.
goofy island.
Uh huh.
I think both of us have a Star of Providence island in our brain. I definitely do.
I know you do. I don't know if that's how I would conceptualize it, but sure, let's go with that.
But we have both spent a lot of time in that virtual place.
Yes.
And today we kind of want to talk together about each floor of the place and our thoughts on it and some of our experiences there.
Before we go on, I do want to make a bit of a disclaimer regarding this episode. Although all of the floors and the rooms that you see in game they're definitely there and we've all seen them.
Hmm.
A lot of what we're going to say in this episode is speculation from our part and our own headcanons or interpretations from those floors and rooms, right? So
Hmm.
you should take everything we're about to say with a bit of a grain of salt. There are many possible and valid interpretations of what you see, and
Hmm.
we're not trying to say that ours are the only valid ones or the best ones. You can have your own idea of how this all fits together, and that's perfectly fine. The devs might just outright say, no, you guys, you got it wrong. And it happens, but I just want to stress, this is not gospel. This is just how Malachi and I interpret what the game shows us. And if you have your own interpretation, feel free to share it with us.
Yeah, we'd love to hear some additional interpretations.
Absolutely.
So the first floor is,
Hmm.
of course, where we're going to start, and that is the excavation. The facility itself was built on top of it, and Kleins tells us that the excavation is even older than the facility.
Hmm. Interesting.
I have always imagined that the facility is actually kind of a cover for what was going on beneath it. It's like the facility was some sort of nefarious corporation that discovered the power eternal or the floors below the excavation and built their facility on top of it to hide what they were actually doing.
Ah, yes, the seven evil CEOs of the council.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, and we never see the floors above the excavation, or above the hub rather. And I kind of imagine it like a it's probably like a big office building. I mean, there were definitely some paper pushers, right?
Someone has to be running this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. For all we know, Warden's office was, up at the top.
I do think I do want to point one thing out is that in contrast to all the other floors, and the next one we're going to talk into is the archives, is that the excavation is not a place that's necessarily built. Like everything below it is a floor that is built and has a function.
Hmm.
Supposedly, the excavation it's just you just removed the earth. It kind of gives a different feel of like the architecture is less rooms with specific purposes. It's
Hmm.
just the halls and spaces that you find after the earth has been removed. So it kind of has a different feel of like you're not quite in such a constructed space, and it's more just what you find under the earth, and it's the more earth and rock than steel and wood.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'd actually never thought of that, but that's right. That's very true.
Hmm.
Digging. Everyone's been there digging.
Hmm.
Who was digging? We don't know, but they did a lot of it.
I mean, the one kind of thing where Malik and I kind of not so much disagreed, but saw different ways is like, was the excavation s- like did they excavate because the power eternal was here and like they found it and detected it and went, oh, we should go down there, or was that just what was how did we say it? How was the other way we said that? Like the flip side of that possibility.
So either the excavation was started by the council,
Mm-hmm.
and the ruins below existed before the council, or they were created by the council, right? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. That's how we said it.
Hmm.
So, but again, we're dealing with incomplete information here, so there's there's many ways to interpret this.
Yeah. Let's take the elevator down to the next floor.
The floor beneath the excavation, the second floor, is the archives. So already just the title alone, the archives, already tells us something quite interesting.
Hmm.
The idea that this floor is where there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of research that is being held here. You
Yeah.
see, you imagine shelves, bookcases, libraries, you know, cards with information. What exactly is being archived down here? What kind of information is being held? Is it perhaps research on the schools of magic?
Hmm.
Maybe. Is it information about the power eternal, the eternal domain, the ritual required to summon forth that power?
How to open a doorway to the void.
Hmm. And whatever creatures might be on the other side of it.
Mm.
I theorize, it's just my headcanon, that maybe, you see it's full of records everywhere, but they are in a language that your character cannot understand. It is a
Mm.
completely different language. So the information is there, it's just inaccessible to you in a sense.
Hmm. Well, one thing you had mentioned too is Klein's, the cat, seems to know a lot about the facility and enemies and the council and what happened before we got there.
Hmm.
And the archives could be where Klein's learned as much as he knows. If Klein's can read that language and Klein's has spent a lot of time poking around down there, maybe that's how Klein's gained all that intel.
That's definitely the case.
One thing also that I find interesting about the archives is there are candles throughout that are burning.
Hmm.
And this seems to imply that there are still other visitors or native denizens to the facility that are going through the archives, maintaining them, perhaps even continuing to archive things. Someone's keeping the candles lit.
You're thinking perhaps the mages,
That would make sense to me, yes.
like the keepers of the arcane knowledge, making sure it does not fall into anybody else's hands.
Well, an archive that big, I mean, usually archivists are very passionate about what they do.
Mhm.
They want to archive as much as they can to preserve it. They've hoarded a lot of knowledge down there, and I'm sure they would continue to do that.
Yeah, speaking of, we talk all, we say all of the archives and all information, but we have to remember that the facility that we see is not the facility in its true heyday.
Hmm.
What we are coming in after the calamity, whereupon a million souls have lost their home. This is what has remained of the facility, what remains of the archives. So there's the idea that there were previously just untold quantities of knowledge stored here, and you're just seeing whatever has survived everything, whatever has persisted throughout the years. So maybe a lot of it got
Hmm.
lost along the way.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, there could be incomplete records, incomplete archives.
Maybe in the knowledge of the runes, or the texts that the runes created have been burned.
Hmm.
So
When I first played Star of Providence, I expected to encounter lore in the archives, just because I figured, yeah, I'll probably run into a book or something.
I mean, nowadays you kind of can run into a book. It's not very friendly.
That's true. That's a haunted book.
Yeah. But in a sense, the fact that the archives exists and that you know that they're there is lore. It tells you something about this world. It's
Hmm.
just, again, the way that I conceptualize it is it's just in a language that you cannot read. So it's useless to you.
Hmm. I like that. Moving on to the third floor below the archives is the maintenance system. This is the coldest part of the facility. There's lots of ice, there's lots of water. One thing you noted, Nick, is this is also something I never thought of, but that the maintenance system exists to probably cool the bellows and to prevent it from overheating. The bellows are the floor below the maintenance system.
Yeah. And we'll elaborate when we get to it, but like I feel like the bellows are like the engine of the facility, but the
Hmm.
maintenance system is the part where you make sure that it's all running smoothly.
The enemies that you encounter there are probably maintaining the system in some way, if you will. And Iceworm specifically, I've always imagined Iceworm patrols the maintenance system and is clearing out the natural pest that exists in the facility. What is the natural pest? In my imagination, it's the swarmers. The swarmers have always seemed like something that, I don't think the council wants them there, but they're something that's very difficult to get rid of. And I think it's notable that Devourer is in the maintenance system in almost seemingly almost in like the sewer or the water.
Mhm.
And I've imagined that Devourer is Iceworm's arch nemesis. Iceworm's constantly patrolling the maintenance system, trying to clear out the swarmers, and Devourer is just constantly making new ones.
Well, swarmers are one of the few seemingly biological entities that live down here, as
Hmm.
opposed to everything else that is mechanical. And to some extent, it makes sense that they would live in the maintenance system because that's where a lot of water is, which pretty essential for life as we know it, for there to be water. So this is just kind of like the place where mold and little creatures would hide because they can sustain themselves in the crevices of the
Hmm.
maintenance system. And I like that
Yeah.
you imagine Iceworm as kind of the janitor of this place.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why. I've just always thought that, because I'm like, why would they have this giant mech down here?
I mean, a lot of what we encounter are apparently weapons of war that are, to some extent being repurposed here. Another reason why I like the idea of like, oh, the maintenance system and chills the bellows is I like the idea of like the entire facility as a whole is interconnected and their purposes are linked together in some way. Like they're not just these separated chunks, but that there was, in a sense, a design
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
this was all put together.
Yeah. They're separate pieces of a whole.
Yeah, and they work together.
Yeah. Well, we should move right down to the bellows.
The bellows, floor four, as I said, or at least my interpretation, the engine of the facility. This is where
Hmm.
the thing that gives power to the rest of the facility. In a sense, the powers, the mundane power source of like electricity and heat,
Hmm.
not necessarily the arcane or the magical power source that would be somewhere else, but like again the more practical power source of like, well, things need electricity, and electricity generation ends up generating a lot of heat. This is where it comes from, and
Yeah.
perhaps maybe this is where a lot of mechs are built.
Hmm. Yes, that's something I've always imagined because the bellows are also what you find in a forge. And
Hmm.
so the name the bellows has always implied to me that there was a forge. And it would only make sense that mechs and the mechanical enemies that have metal were forged in the bellows, or at least partly forged in the bellows.
Yeah, and I also should point out that I think a lot of the mages are at least biomechanical, or they have had technology grafted into them
Hmm.
as a way to sort of better harness their schools of magic. So maybe this is where that happens, where you know
Mm.
mechs are turned from mere disciples into these machines, part part mechanical, part magical.
I think that would definitely be true for the fire mages because their leader, the grand pyromancer, is in the bellows.
Yep. Ordinator, the one of the council members, is fought here, and they specialize in the School of Flame. So it makes sense that this place gets pretty hot down here,
Hmm.
which is why the maintenance system has to prevent it from overheating.
I think it's also notable that reactor and the reactor's core are also located on the bellows, which ties into what you're saying about it being an engine and the power source.
Hmm. Apparently, must have a pretty good backup system because we kill that, and then the facility keeps on going.
Yeah, somebody comes and plugs in a new reactor core every time we destroy it. Somebody comes up from maintenance system to fix it. That's what happens.
Even though we just came through that and also destroyed it.
The bellows makes a call. Hey, maintenance system. Yeah, a visitor came through again. Yeah, we need a new reactor core.
I
Thanks.
mean, if we want to talk IT system, the joke I think is that Demon from that you see in floor two, he's the main IT guy, and he's not a happy worker.
No, he is not. He's like a lot of IT workers. Very tired.
Shall we dive even deeper?
Please, let's step into the elevator once more and head down to the sanctum, floor 5.
Hmm. What do we find here?
Something that surprisingly a lot of players don't notice right away are the murals on the walls. I
Yep.
certainly didn't notice them right away because I was too distracted looking at the bullets that were heading my way.
Trying to not die.
Yeah, exactly. But the murals on the walls, I think, clearly denote some sort of cult-like following
Hmm.
of Monolith and the Power Eternal.
Hmm.
When I was hoping and praying that Star of Providence would come to Switch, I have the sticker that is all of the mages like worshiping Monolith on my Switch Pro controller.
Hmm.
um, I guess to denote my own cult-like following of this game.
Oh, we've noticed.
But yeah, it's this is a really nice little tidbit of world building because
Hmm.
we never get an explanation as to what this was, but the murals in and of themselves paint a very compelling picture of what this society was and how fanatical they were about their quest for power.
And it also serves as a subtle bit of foreshadowing for what is to come.
It does. And what's neat is you don't really realize that until you fought Monolith and come back through again.
Indeed. And as you go down the floors, you start to realize that there is increased security because floors 1 and 2, the boss door is protected by just one Nimbus. And then in floors 3 and 4, there's too many bosses, therefore, two Nimbuses guarding the boss door. And then you get to floor 5, and there's three of them.
Triple
Now,
Nimbus.
to some extent, this is just gameplay scaling,
Hmm.
but conversely, it also paints the picture that the deeper you're going, you're going into deeper and deeper security areas that visitors are really not meant to get to.
Hmm.
So this is feeling like, okay, now you're really not supposed to be here, and the council or whoever built this is really trying to make sure that you don't go any further.
Yeah. Well, this is even more evident with the boss,
Hmm.
Overlord, which is a huge difficulty spike for players
Yep.
and also just an incredibly imposing mech.
Yeah. This is going to be the first real difficulty spike that a lot of players will encounter because it has a enormous health pool and its attacks are way denser than any of the other previous floor bosses.
Hmm. And it also has three phases.
It's like, yay, you beat it. No, you didn't.
So, onto the sixth floor.
For what it's worth, I give the sixth floor the nickname of Forbidden.
Hmm.
That's just what I call it. Anyway, we have touched on this floor a little bit before when we talked about how this game makes us feel and sort of, the the aesthetic and the setting of it, but
Yeah.
so I'll try to not repeat myself too much. But anyway, this floor is the part that is closest to the source of the power eternal that is trapped underneath. This is a deeply scarred area, and but what I mean by that is that all of the floors thus far, kind of by being named, you know what their purpose is, you know what they were meant to do,
Hmm.
you know what role they played in the facility. The sixth floor, whatever it used to be, it is no longer even recognizable. Like there's no like there's no sense of this being kind of a lived in place. This is
Hmm.
just a place that's been obliterated and destroyed, and you don't even know what was in here. It's just barren and hostile to the point where, like, you referenced the murals in floor 5
Hmm.
and floor 6. There's no Sometimes there's just holes, and when you look through them, you see something that doesn't even seem like a place or a real. It's just kind of this strange pattern,
Hmm.
and kind of gives the sense of like, this is a surreal place. This doesn't feel real in the same way the others floors do. It's just strange and warped.
And spooky.
Yeah.
Because you're also beginning to see uh, some scarier enemies,
Hmm.
and also the walls themselves coming alive to fight you,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
just ominous and threatening.
Yeah, to the point where down here you will not find Bloke. Bloke is not here to help you anymore. There's no upgrade terminal either. If you were hoping for a second wind or artifact, uh, that's not coming for you. I'm sorry.
I wasn't hoping for second win because I never have that turned on.
Well, I know you don't, but some players who are reaching floor 6 in their earliest days kind of might be, because it's a very large area and it is very deadly.
You can encounter bloke if you find the Sunglasses cart, but then and only then will Bloke descend.
Yeah. And there is a very rare chance that you will find or spawn a shortcut room that has an upgrade terminal in it.
I've had that happen before, and it was an amazing feeling.
Yeah, yeah. But still, by default, none of these things are here. And that just only serves to heighten the sense of like, this place is otherworldly and it is not kind to you.
If you manage to get past that floor, you can head to nowhere.
Nowhere. A place of, this is exactly what I wrote down here in my notes,
Hmm.
of questionable reality, because it seems more like a glitched memory from a failing computer than a physical place. Like it doesn't feel like, it feels even less real than forbidden in a sense, because it
Hmm.
just doesn't, it feels, it's made out of data than bricks and mortar.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of weird combinations that you start to see. You're
Hmm.
seeing pieces of every single floor of the facility, sometimes in the same room, and you're
Yeah.
seeing enemies from all the floors, often in the same rooms, and then you're seeing like weird variants of enemies that you've seen before.
Yeah, it's kind of like a, a lot of parts of the facility has just been smashed together to create something,
Hmm.
and that makes it highly unpredictable and very hard to survive. Like there's definitely people when they play through floor 7, they're just praying for for sort of other shop or some health, because it is mean. It is a mean floor.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
There are shops in nowhere, aren't there?
yes, there are. Bloke will show up down there. I don't know why, he just does.
Or a simulation of him?
Perhaps. I mean, it has kind of been alluded to by the devs that, uh, for instance, the demon you fight in floor 2 is not the real demon, it's just a hologram.
Hmm.
So, holograms of council members potentially has some precedent.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the community have theorized about nowhere being some sort of simulation or virtual reality. And I think, or at least I hope, we get a little more of lore about that in the next update. It definitely
Hmm.
seems like we will from the some of the teasers we've seen.
Mm-hmm. I would like that too.
So there is another floor we need to talk about, which
Hmm.
is a side floor. It's another path you can take. We mentioned it. Well, we mentioned one of the main denizens here, the warden.
The temple. It's very odd. You enter temple through like a handheld game device, and it's a cartridge, maybe? I mean, I know you love cartridges and handheld gaming devices, Malachi, so maybe you have some comment on it?
um, I've never really thought too hard upon a lore reason for this, but if I had to pull one out right now, it would be that Warden um, sealed the Chaos God in a item that is of significance to himself, but maybe not to other people. So,
Hmm?
in a way,
Oh,
that would be a good way to seal something, right? Like if it's like the whole Indiana Jones thing when uh, they're trying to pick.
the Holy Grail.
Yes, thank you. They're trying to pick the Holy Grail, and the first guy's like, "Oh, Jesus would have used the coolest cup," and so he finds the one that looks the fanciest. Maybe Warden was operating on Indiana Jones logic and was like, "You know what? I'm not going to seal Chaos God in anything fancy. No, 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 no. I'm going to seal him in a Game Boy because no one's going to pick that up and try to play it."
It's a bit of hiding it in plain sight sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
In a seemingly innocuous and trivial object, therein shall be the prison for this.
Well, Warden himself enters the Game Boy, enters the cartridge, right? And I
Hmm.
gotta say, if I had to seal some sort of ancient eldritch being inside something, if I could seal them inside a game console or my PC, and then I got to go in there, that'd be pretty cool. I'd probably use my powers to do that.
But anyway, we enter the temple,
Mhm.
and immediately the first thing you see is a shrine to the council itself, 7 statues of all the
Mm.
council members.
That they probably carved of themselves, or at least uh, requested that that be made. So it speaks to their hubris, I think, and their hubris and pride that led to their downfall.
It's a very old story, that one. Pride
Yes, it
cometh
is.
before the fall.
Mhm.
Yeah. So already that makes a strong impression and tells you this might have been a place of worship or
Mm.
a shrine to their power and their accomplishments.
Mhm.
And the irony is that now it is sealed away, sort of separated, removed from the facility. So the place that was used to extol their accomplishments and the power now is no longer exists and is inaccessible. So
Mhm.
I find that potential irony quite delightful.
So the temple's also where Chaos God is sealed, and
Mhm.
it's not just a temple; it's essentially a prison, right?
Mhm.
Which is a point that you've made. It's separated from the facility, and it is some sort of separate dimension. And that becomes
Mhm.
very clear when you unleash Chaos God.
Yeah, you're no longer in the facility at that. It becomes immediately apparent to you at that point. You're no longer in the facility. You're somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, and it's hard to say where that is, you know?
Mm.
It's not space, it's not anywhere. It's just some sort of dimension, and you see Chaos God kind of rise out of whatever he rises out of.
Yeah. And like adding to that is that this floor has mini bosses that do not appear anywhere else in the game,
Mhm.
enemies that don't appear anywhere else in the game, and even the shopkeeper is not Bloke, it's something else. So this only adds to this disconnect from the facility. There's still a connection there to some extent,
Mhm.
but it is at the same time it is someplace else entirely in so many ways.
Yeah, it's functioning separately, and I don't think it has anything to do directly, at least, with, Monolith, the
Hmm.
Power Eternal. I mean, Chaos God seems to be separate from the Power Eternal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but when you defeat Chaos God, one of the weapons that you can get is a Grasp of Entropy,
Mhm.
and it is a runic weapon, but it is not using the red runes that you associate with the Power Eternal and the facility. It is its
Mm.
own kind of runes, and a lot of players. If by the way, if you haven't done what I'm about to tell you, go do what I'm about to tell you. It's a lot of fun. But you can take Grasp of Entropy all the way to Machine. A
Mhm.
Machine uses the red runes of the Power Eternal, and Grasp of Entropy completely nullifies so much of its attacks.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Yeah,
this.
no, dude, you gotta do this. Seriously, if you go to the machine fight with Grasp of Entropy, anytime it summons like those rune circles that shoot attacks,
Mhm.
it just absorbs them. It just goes nope, just
Oh, that's
and it
awesome.
completely neutralizes them.
Wow. I'm still learning new things about this game.
Oh, and you might know this, some of you might not. If you go to fight Chaos God with a runic weapon, it will absorb that as well, because it is still using the red runes of the Power Eternal. Because
Hmm.
remember, you unlock runic by defeating Monolith, who has tapped into the Power Eternal itself.
Mhm.
Malachi, I'll let you decide if you want to edit this out later, but the only exception to that is if you show up with a runic weapon that you have gotten from Hand of the First, because
Mhm.
Hand of the First uses not the red runes of the Power Eternal, not the white runes of Chaos God, but the green question mark runes of the Warden.
What?
And those runes do not get neutralized by Chaos
What?
God. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I never knew any of this. That is so cool. So this is basically 3 separate schools of magic that are
Three separate sets of runes,
hmm,
not magic runes. And so if you have Hand of the First transform into a runic weapon when you fight Chaos God, that is the one instance in which it will not absorb the runic weapon because it comes from a different set of runics.
that is awesome.
Yeah.
God damn, Team D13.
I'm, I mean the whole thing was a big tangent, but I felt I wanted to say it.
Worth it, worth it. I did not know that. That is so cool.
Mhm. I think it's on the wiki too, actually,
Oh,
or at
man.
least it should be.
If it's not, I know a couple guys we can speak to.
That's true.
Thanks so much for listening to our Star of Providence fan cast. Big thanks to Garoslaw for allowing us to use his music and sound effects.
Please be sure to check out all of Garoslaw's soundtracks on Bandcamp. Base Game soundtrack, Relics of the Past soundtrack, and the 5th Anniversary Edition soundtrack.
If you have any comments or suggestions for the show, reach out to us on Discord. We'll post the server link in the show description.
And there you will find fellow pilots to talk with and discuss the show. Thanks for listening. We'll hope you'll join us next time.
This is what you came for, isn't it?
So be it.